Lori, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. This is my first time doing a podcast live on a couch with headphones and a microphone. It's pretty exciting.
It's going to be so much better, and you're going to love the headphones by the end of it, I promise. It's going to lock you in. We're going to hit a flow state, and
yeah. Oh, I love flow states.
I think we're going to go deep today.
Yeah, I think so.
So I was thinking that a perfect jumping off point for us today would be this workshop that I hosted that you just recently came to. Tell us a little bit about it.
God, it was so good. And that was your first one live, right?
Yes, I had done 2 on Zoom before, but this was my first one with 10 people. The first one I did had probably 6 people, and then the second one was like 4 or 5.
It was so good. There were 10 of us, I believe. We were at Insperity. It was co-hosted by June On and the group. And so we all came in a good mood, 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and curious what you would do. And you got up there in just that beautiful flow state. I'm going to use that word for you too. And you shared your beautiful stories because they're just so lyrical. And your story about how you met your beautiful girlfriend, and the story of slipping to her. I guess at a restaurant, it was a receipt with your number on there. It's a great story. Also jumping into a pool. I guess cannonballing in a pool is more accurate. So the stories it's sort of like poetry in a way. It inspires the soul about what's possible. It's really important to hear other people taking chances. So that seasoned us into the moment. And then you guided us into the concepts about bold action. And, I've read books on this. I've been in other conversations, and we talk about what we should do, perhaps. But what you guided us into was the big question I remember we all kind of gasped was, when it's the last chapter or a couple years of your life and it's coming towards the end, what will you regret? Ooh, it's heavy.
Yes, and that's why I love talking about regret. It's kind of weird to say I love talking about regret, but it is the flip side of the dream energy. So dream is the positive. Regret, I feel, is the same energy, but it's that dark side. It's that, oh no, I'm on my deathbed and I'm having these realizations, these illuminations come too late, as Joseph Campbell says, that I didn't do this thing. I didn't have the courage to live a life true to myself. I didn't stay connected with my friends. All of these fantastic, these horrific regrets of the dying, but fantastic realizations if they come early, if they come before the end.
So important. You kind of remind me, I've been married for 34 years to my soulmate. And the night of our wedding was one of the most spectacular days of my life, for sure. And we both jump into the limousine. We've got all the cans on the back. We've got all the confetti all over ourselves. And the limousine pulls away. And I start crying. And the limousine driver says, "Oh, how beautiful. Look at this bride. She's weeping from all of her joy." And I said, "Well, yeah, I am actually really happy to be married to my husband. I am weeping because of the day. But I'm actually crying because I realize that my parents are going to die someday." And it was morose, some might say, but actually it was really attuned to the moment that a significant chapter, it was only 24, but I realized I was going from maidenhood, or a young woman who, was living my parents' home, even through college. My last year I did that. And now I'm going into this next phase. And that means they're going to their next phase, potentially into midlife and beyond. So I've always had that kind of morose concept of death or loss, and it's actually completely added to my reverence for life and the sacred. So I appreciated when you brought that up, because everyone just looked down at their journals and started writing down things that they really cared about, and they went deeper than maybe, lose 10 pounds, or something, right?
Right, and I feel like that allows people to drop in, because the workshop is how to live a story worth telling. It's all about taking bold action, and this hypothesis that fortune favors the bold isn't just a cool quote, but a formula for how the universe works. And that if you consistently take bold action, the universe is watching, the universe gets excited, and it rewards you with these miracles or magic because you're consistently getting out of your comfort zone. But all of that positivity can be helpful, but again, sometimes you need that deepening, that drop into the regret piece. So I'm glad that resonated. I knew it would with you, because you can go deep quickly.
Very quickly. Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about collaborating with chance right there. The universe needs and loves that because, just look at the natural world. How can we have 4.5 billion years of successful evolution without chance taking, without life and death and renewal? Right now we're entering into fall. The trees are all dropping their leaves. They are getting rid of something from the past. Nature is preparing itself for the quiet, for the dark, for, what might look dead to others. When I just recently visited Maine, and I was there for a wedding, and I noticed trees as they were dropping their leaves, and I saw some that had already dropped their leaves, and I thought, oh, those trees are dead. But we think that here in San Diego, if we see a tree without leaves, it must be dead. No, it's actually deeply preparing for life. So, this drawing in, this considering of the dark, of the lostness, of the exile, what might you regret? As an executive recruiter for 20 years, I ask people, what would your older self have you do right now as they're trying to choose between two jobs? Ask the 40-year-old woman, this is a 25-year-old maybe I'm talking to, what does a 40-year-old woman hope that you will consider? So, we're time bending a bit, right? We're shape shifting. And you did that for us. So we went there, and then you actually said, okay, folks, I'm also going to show you how to set up a process so that you can't cheat. So for example, let's say, it's writing a book and you want to write 3 pages every day. If you don't write those 3 pages, then you pay your friend $10 on Venmo that day. That was so brilliant because, of course, you're not going to want to have to, pay out all that money, but it also holds you accountable in a fun way. And you get a friend in on that who says, hey, thanks for the $20 this week, but, rather you keep that. So then, wow, you're bringing accountability to this exercise. This wasn't just fluff. Then you offered us about 20 minutes to consider, all right, what are you going to do to make this real? How are you going to set this up for yourself? And we all went into pairs, or some people went one-on-one just into themselves. And they started texting and emailing various people, setting things up. And so I did the same. My number one, and I had 3 on my list, if you recall. My number one was a poetry book that I wrote during COVID timeframe, really, when I had finished watching an extraordinary series, and I recommend this to everyone with all my heart. And it's called Dickinson. It's on Apple. And I swear to God, Emily Dickinson is coming right on through the eons or the epics over to us right now and talking to us. And when I finished that series, I was broken open to write poetry. And to me, it's a soul merge. It's feelings merging, deep, deep, deep depth of feeling, merging with your throat and your mouth. And, when you write these poems. And I wrote 50 in 3 months. My eyes were swollen shut with styes. It was enormously overwhelming. My doctor told me to go to sleep. That was actually the ticket to well-being. But I knew in my class with you that I wanted to publish it, finally. It's been sitting in my drawer for 1.5 years. So I texted a renowned author who's a friend of mine, and I asked her, would she read it and would she write the foreword? That was your suggestion, have somebody write the foreword. While I was texting her that, or emailing her on my phone, my son called. He's 22. And my second list item was go to Patagonia with him. So I said, hey, babe, I'm busy. I'm in the middle of a workshop, but you want to go to Patagonia someday and make it happen? And he said, yeah, Mom, call me later. So we've already been talking about that. And then I finished the text or the email, and I was afraid to send it, honestly, because I've experienced sometimes some rejection in these sort of situations. And so I went ahead and read it to Abby, who is there sitting right next to me. And I said, what do you think of this? She said, do it now. Took my finger, boom, I hit send, took a breath, let it go. Within 10 hours, Mary emailed me back. She said, absolutely, send me your manuscript. I'd be more than happy to support you. It was a great day.
Yes, I love that so much. And that's actually the second time that's happened with someone who is writing a book, or you had already written your poetry book, and they use this thing that we're talking about, the accountability piece, the paying a friend, the sending it to someone you're nervous to send it to. It's a psychological concept called a commitment device. Yeah. So it's any action you can take in the present moment to lock in a desired future action. And for you, the action you took in the present moment was, hey, let me send this to Mary. Let me ask her to read it, to write the foreword, so that locks in the fact that you have to publish it. if you get her to write the foreword and you don't publish it, she's going to be like, Lori, where's the book?
Exactly.
And so you can do these things. And that's why I love the workshop is step 1 is define your dream. Step 2 is to create your commitment using a commitment device. And then that step 3, which was 20 minutes then, I think we need more time in the future. You take action right now in the present moment. So like you said, you wrote this years ago and you took action on it because you had that reason to, you had the catalyst. And good on Abby for saying, do it.
Yeah.
I was thinking you were going to say she took your phone and hit send for you. That would have been hilarious as well.
It was great to have a witness. It really, really was. And, you know, what ended up happening, really, you opened the space. You created a portal, you know. That's what we are doing, all of us that are in a position to try to hold space for people to move beyond this box that we're in, that we're born into. And Gabor Mate talks about this. I love how he shares, as children, there are 2 things going on that are critical to our development and our well-being. And one is pleasing our caregiver. He says, you know, humans as an animal, it takes us a long time till we're independent. You know, if you're a lizard and you break out of a shell, you're on your own. There's no mama lizard there anywhere. She leaves the eggs, bye-bye, you know. Birds need a little bit more time, but not much. You know, elephants a little bit more, but they actually can run. You know, they get wobbly and off they go. But humans, we have huge heads. We're dead if we don't have anybody to take care of us, you know. So Gabor Mate talks about how we have to please then our caregiver in order to stay in their good graces and be cared for. So what happens when you're doing that is that you are then suppressing parts of you that maybe are not deemed as valuable or acceptable in the social family dynamic. So you could be suppressing a very central part of you, you know, somebody who takes chances, who wants to write poetry or, you know, or has some other idea than maybe being a banker or a doctor, maybe because that's what your family's always done. And so you're in the box. And then you come out and you go beyond 18, maybe you go to college, maybe you don't, but you go on to life, but you're still in the box. So you're still pleasing people according to how you shaped yourself. People like you and I, you know, my work within the working channel, helping people when they are unhappy with their jobs and they come seeking support and they're saying, Lori, I need a job. They just want to fly and get the next job. And I'm saying, hey, we got to be like a monarch. We got to go beyond just the flight. You know, we need to go into the imaginal, but that's still not the first step. We actually have to shed things first. And we have to shed that box, all those preconceived ideas of who you must be or who you are that somebody else put all over you, so that you can shed that. Now you have a chance to go into that imaginal place, to do all that, what would I regret? And then to take those chances, you know, and actually become a cross-pollinator and fly. So holding space like you did for us and like what I do in Career Ecology is to come into that metamorphic spot out of where you have locked yourself or society has locked you. It's usually kind of a joint enterprise. It's usually internalized oppression. That's what we're doing. Internalized oppression. That is terribly sad. And Gabor Mate says that's traumatizing. When you diss yourself or when you disassociate or abandon self, it is the most dramatic, saddest piece of trauma. Because if you can't be there for yourself, know your own dreams, love your own self, how could anyone else truly love you? It's so sad. So I'm grateful for that workshop because we had that opening to dream and to feel uncomfortable and to have somebody else witness it. And then what happened is around the table, as people shakingly in some places stated it out loud, at least 3 or 4 people jumped in and said, oh, well, I'll help you with your podcast, or I'll be your first guest, or, you know, I know somebody who can help you buy that house, all these things. There was this sense of a rush of support because, you know, we get ghosted so much in society. There's so many ways that we're rejected every day. To have a public experience of people supporting your dream makes me want to cry right now. There's a lot that happened in that workshop. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being there. And you're touching on something that is so core to me. And it's this idea that when you first have your dream, it's very fragile and you do have to protect it. It's something I mentioned in the workshop, but you can't just go around willy-nilly showing your dream to anyone, because for most people, it's going to challenge them in some way. They're going to say, why are you writing a book? That makes me feel weird. Or you can't do that. That's not like us, especially if it's family, even though they love you.
Yeah.
I tell this all the time, but the first person I told that I wanted to become a life coach was my mom. And the first thing she said was, you're too young to be a life coach. And so there I am. I took this dream that I had worked up the courage to share, and I just took it back and I put it back on the shelf and didn't think about it for another year.
Whoa.
And I joke with her all the time about it now, and she's so supportive now. But you do have to be careful who you share it with at first, and that's why it was such a beautiful space of these 10 people coming together to not only celebrate each other's dreams, but to say, wait, I got you on that piece, and I know someone for this piece. And like you said, that coming together of support was beautiful, and that's the magic that's created in groups and especially in person.
Oh my gosh. I love that story you shared about your mom. And, you know, we moms, you know, we're trying to make sure our kids are safe and steer them on a path of, you know, financial security and all that. And little do we know that's part of that shaping that's happening in our childhood, where we're putting away something that might be risky. You reminded me of a story through Career Ecology. And I think this is when you and I first decided, when we first became friends or connected through the group, that we needed to do a podcast, because you were talking about bold action. And I shared with you how in Career Ecology, I asked people, I say, okay, we're going to come up with a 3-fold path for your career launch, not just the singular path or job that you think you're good at or should be going towards or for. And I said, and not even just 2. We're going to look at your status quo. Then we're going to look at divergent, and we're going to go ahead and take those skills that you have in your status quo and we're going to put them somewhere else and see where that goes. And then we're going to do out of the box, aka bold action. Gregory Benedict. And so there's this one woman that I just love her story, and I've known her for years. So I was taking her through it. She's a pharmacist in long-term care pharmacy, and it was time for her to move out of the bubble wrap room. That's what they basically do there. And I said, so, all right, so we can look at safe jobs. I know you have an income you need to make. So we'll look at employers that might excite you. So that's status quo. Let's take those skills, and what else could we do that's divergent? She said, well, maybe I could consult with it. I'd love that, you know, then I can really be out of the bubble wrap room. And I said, excellent. That's good for number 2. What's your out of the box? Tell me. And I love it when someone says, oh God, I don't know. I don't know if I want to tell you what it is. So first of all, I know they have one. So it's really good that they even know what one might be. So that's a first good stage. And I said, okay, this is exciting. This is really good. I love your resistance. So this is safe space. I hold neutral space for dreaming. So I always say that to people. You get to say anything to me, anything. What is it? And she said, Lori, I'm finishing my certification in library science. She's a pharmacist. And I said, what? Tell me more about this. She said, I love the smell of libraries, the books, the sound of books opening and closing. I love research. I love knowledge base. I love connecting people to knowledge. She says, I love the antiquity. And she just went on. And I said, all right, you know, you said it out loud. So something's going to happen right now about this. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, just so happens that one of my closest friends from my childhood is the dean of the library, at the medical library, actually, at Stanford, which is 5 miles from your house. How about I introduce you to her for lunch, and let's just see what happens. Well, they had lunch, and this pharmacist is now a medical librarian. And it only happened because she spoke it. She collaborated with Chance. Turns out I was a conduit because I had a relationship that was key for her. So that's the fascinating part about this and what happened in your workshop. It must be spoken out loud. Otherwise, the co-creative universe cannot open its conduit. And there is no collaboration. Now, sometimes, to your point, you can speak it out loud, and others that are too afraid will do everything they can to squash it. So it's almost like you need a support group of those that say, let's speak it out loud, let's keep speaking it out loud. And when we do that, in a way, what we're doing is we're making it safer for those that haven't, and maybe those that are kind of closing it down with us. We're making it safer and saying, we can be chaotic in the moment. We don't have to stay in the box. You know, we get to be as crazy as evolution in a way and imagine things. It can be a thought experiment. And I just feel like every time when we open that throat chakra And we speak these things that we're shifting the balance between fear and love. And it's actually a loving act to take that chance. And we kind of shift that energy matrix in a way.
And just by using your voice to speak into existence a dream or an idea, you're literally shifting and bending reality.
Mm-hmm.
So if she hadn't have shared that dream with you, might never have happened. And the fact that there's so many good things about this. One is that I've seen this so many times with my own clients. They talk about one thing in the status quo and they kind of talk about it like this. And they're like, I could get this job and whatever. And then, or I could do this thing over here that's so crazy and exciting. And they just light up.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because they'll be like, I don't know which one I should choose. And you want to just be like, really? Like you don't know? Like
Yeah.
Film yourself, look at it back, and you'll be able to tell instantly.
Yeah.
There's that piece. And then because she was willing to, I talk about this all the time, you have to take off the mask and stop playing the part of the person you were if you want to dance with the universe, if you want to collaborate with chance. I love that term because otherwise you're going to keep attracting and keep indicating and signaling that you want that life because you're wearing this costume, you're wearing that mask. For me, when I finally took off that mask and said, I hate finance, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to change my whole life. That's the exact moment when things started to open up. And because I was speaking about it and getting it out there, that's when I started to meet the right people. The opportunities come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And you shift into, I mentioned this in the workshop, you go from linear progress where 1 + 1 = 2, you slowly work your way up the ladder and get the next position, to exponential progress where 1 + 1 = 12, or orange. And these things that are seemingly magical and don't make sense happen over and over again. And time is not a factor. You're literally time shifting, bending time. Logically, should never have happened, statistically improbable. And yet you wind up saying, oh, I'm thinking about this one thing. And then the next day you meet someone who is talking about the exact same thing. And that's where I just am in awe. And I say, I don't believe in God necessarily, but I believe in something.
Yeah.
There's something going on here that's too magical and crazy for there to be nothing.
It's so true. You know, it's funny you bring up believing in God or something. I call myself a biomimic. I know that spirit is in nature, and I look for nature as a signal, a conduit for guidance, information, what direction I should go in. Because if I'm looking for that from somebody who's really deeply in their box and very afraid, then they might be projecting that onto me, and I might feel shame or fear again and just put it away for a year, like you said. But nature always, if you tune into that, you can find it there. So there was a time in my life I had to take, many times I've had dramatic, bold action. I've had to take it. I've been forced into it. That it was almost life and death. And there was one that was just really dramatic that scared me a lot. And that was in 2016. And it was the time when I was forced to sell my home in 2 months or go bankrupt. And I had to move from the Bay Area, and I moved down here to Paradise. But I didn't know North County, San Diego. But at the time, my husband, I'm the primary breadwinner, my husband had come up to my office, and he had a worried look on his face. And he said, you know, we haven't closed really a match with anybody, with any of our clients for 6 months, and we're running out of money. And what I say to my husband is, you know, I don't want to hear about that. I just have to stay in the flow. So I kind of chased him away. And off he went. He came back the next day with a spreadsheet, and he said, we only have this much of equity line. We're in trouble. I looked at that, and I went into panic. And I realized that I was going to be forced into some sort of bold action that I was going to have to take. And I was feeling sudden shame. I started walking around my house with outward language, I'm a loser. Because I remember the first time I signed on the dotted line to even have a home or get a mortgage, that I was fearful that I wouldn't be able to pay for it someday. And so here it was, coming to truth, to life. And I felt like a loser. And I was searching for answers. What happened was I had not only my therapist and my blind neighbor across the street helping me, saying, just for a season, for the next 3 months, go ahead and come up with maybe a threefold plan. Play with chance. See what might happen. You don't have to own this and know what's going to happen. And so I did come up with a threefold path. And the first was that my company would come back to life in time. And it just so happened that the person who had an offer out from UC Davis Medical Center, his name was Mohammed. So it was just this huge biblical name. I was like, Mohammed, you could save me, you know?
Please, Mohammed,
please. Please, Mohammed, please. The second was that something that I knew I was birthing, which is now Career Ecology, would come in time. It's ridiculous. But I thought maybe it would come and bring income. The third was that we would sell our home, take our money, and run to where I didn't know. The idea was to love all three up the same. I wanted Mohammed to be the guy and to help me stay. My family was there, my beautiful home that I buried my dog's ashes in. I thought I'd be next to him. You know, I had all these things and I wanted to stay. In these ensuing weeks, as I'm waiting for Mohammed and he's hemming and hawing and I'm feeling still all of this fear, I started to have these experiences through nature. So one night I'm rushing up to get blood out of a turnip into my office to try to talk to Mohammed again. And I'm rushing up to my office and I almost step on a possum that is playing dead. I had never had one in my pathway in my yard. It was the first experience and I went, it snapped me out of my fear. And I went up and I typed it into my computer, spirit animal possum. Well, obviously it is play dead. You are being guided. Do not overthink and overdo. Go with the flow here. So for maybe 12 hours, I was in the flow. I'm like, sure, okay, got the possum energy. It's great. Next day, freaking out again over something, rushing around, and I'm opening my front door, and there's a massive, like the size of my hand, stick bug. And it's on the door, and it's like, I'm not even alive. I'm a stick. I don't move. I'm like, God, this message of just not moving. The next day was the most spectacular. I'm walking my dog, feeling nervous again, a little pathway by my house. And I see a deer as close as you are to me right now. My dream, I see all these YouTube videos with people with experiences with live animals. It never happened to me, you know, wild animals, never. So I thought, it's like there, it's looking at me, it starts walking towards me. My Labrador is like growling and wants to get close to this deer. And I'm thinking, Brody, you're going to mess this up for me. So I tie him to a branch and I look at the deer and I take a step towards the deer. What happened? Deer ran away. Completely messed up the moment of something mysterious coming my way where I needed to be still, not overact, over-respond, overthink, any of it. I went into control mode and tried to make it happen. Finally, when a crow dove at my head, I said to my husband, you know, I let go. I'm just going to see what happens. And sure enough, Mohammed declined the offer. And I looked at my husband and I said, we're out of here. Where are we going? And he said, I don't know. What do you think? I said, well, maybe Sacramento. And he goes, I'm thinking beach. And we hopped on and we looked at North County and all the schools and we came. It was a bold move that was made out of a great deal of resistance, but also flow as if I had been thrown into a river. And my two choices were to try to swim towards the shore, get thrown underneath a boulder and drown, or find the through line. Where always in the rivers, there's that through line. It's going towards that sea of love. If you're on that river and you can find that, you'll make your way safely. And ultimately, that's what happened in that bold action. I was forced into it, but now I have this story and proof that it worked. But there was a lot of mental stuff going on, a lot of fear, you know, changing my life. And a lot of people in my life said, why are you leaving? And what is this all about? Well, sure enough, when we did move here, my company turned on within a week. You know, it was like, thank you. Remember the rewards, like you said?
A couple of things are coming up for me. One is this idea of freezing or playing dead and being still.
Yeah.
It's a Buddhist concept. It's also a very Taoist concept of Wu Wei, that art of non-doing. And it's something that I struggle with all the time. Pretty funny to think about. I struggle with not doing anything. But a lot of people who are like us can resonate with that. The high achiever, the always having to be in motion, doing something. And it's got me thinking a lot because I truly think that taking bold action is a cheat code. You don't need to know what you want or what to do or what's going to happen next. You just need to move your body through space and time into a situation that makes you uncomfortable and see what happens. And the reward comes in. But there's this piece of these ancient Eastern traditions saying, just chill. And I'm really uncomfortable with that. And so I'm trying to figure out the balance between taking the bold action to shake things up and just sitting in stillness.
Oh, yeah. That is such a, God, that is a great conversation to have. I mean, that's something we could have over a whole weekend, because that concept of the role of chaos, Michael Meade says chaos precedes renewal. Even the word apocalypse, and you take that all the way back to the Greek origin, really is about renewal. And of course, we have all the scary movies that it's always just about blowing up the world and monsters and things. But it really is this idea of surrendering to, some sort of reorganization that's going on, where you have a lot of different energies all at once, that you have to trust that there's going to be some sort of harmony at the end. There's a movie I love called The Biggest Little Farm, and these two farmers decided to collaborate with chaos rather than to have a monocropped farm. And they said, we are going to, over 7 years, bring back this plot of land into its wildness. And we know that we don't control it. We're stewards of it. But ultimately, they had to move towards harmony with a certain amount of acceptable disharmony. That's key. There's so much fear over disharmony, but how can evolution even work without that? So there's this concept of, how about we come into life and maybe we can be raised by our parents, or we come to coaches later who can help us understand the very central nature-based need for chaos, for disharmony, in order for some new concept of organization or creativity to be born. If it is constantly the same, there's no way something new can be discovered. Even painters understand that. They make a mistake in their painting. Picasso, I'm sure, played around with all sorts of concepts of that when he said, I'm going outside of the realism and coming into this fragmented, where the nose is on top of somebody's eye and, all that stuff. So, when you find that there's somebody in your life who's bringing you some chaos, it's a gift, But still, you can understand a certain amount of, acceptable. So you can get that, then you can pull back in, have that time in the chrysalis, have that space to allow it to organize itself. You don't have to be in perpetual chaos, but even nature, again, through its seasons, very chaotic in spring, and even summer. There's a lot going on. But fall and winter are exhales, and that's that stillness pulling back. If we just could learn from nature socially, from a standpoint of sustainability, engineering, we'd be good.
Nature has all the answers. And this feels like the perfect time to transition into what I wanted to talk about for a part of today, which is two things. One, when we first met, we were talking about that journey into chaos and things falling apart. And there's this beautiful term called beautiful destruction, where sometimes everything in your life needs to fall apart for the next evolution of you to be reborn like a phoenix, to emerge from it.
Yeah.
And it is terrifying when it's happening. Things are going well, and then suddenly the wheels start falling off, and it feels like everything is happening at the same time. And you and I have bonded over our love of Carl Jung, and his thoughts on depression are fascinating. I was jotting down a couple notes this morning about it, and he was talking about how depression often foreshadows a renewal of the personality or a burst of creativity. It's this period to go inward. Depression is literally bringing us down out of the external world into ourselves. And in modern society, we see this as the worst thing ever.
Right.
Let's medicate it. Let's ignore it. Let's not sit with it. But if you do sit with it, there's so much to be discovered about yourself. And he talks about how depression is really a tool for self-transformation.
Yes. Carl Jung, boy, these are the days now where he's really coming back more and more with everything he experienced and studied and thought about. He went into the deepest depressive complex of any one of these kind of originalists who were studying the psyche back in the day. You had Freud and Adler and Jung and Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl, of course, he had a very depressive situation where he was taken to a concentration camp. But Carl Jung was self-imposed, and he shut himself in a tower that he had built so that he could go into the deepest states of subconscious and even into his shadows. He talks about the shadow quite a bit. And it's when we are repressing And we get regressive if we're repressing even our shadow. You know, what are these urges? What's making us feel rancorous? I mentioned that word before we started. I love the word rancor because someone like me, I'm known as a very happy, kind, loving person. I was born to be happy Lori. Well, guess what? I can feel rancor. I really can. I didn't discover that until midlife. Women are especially shaped to be nice. When someone says, you're nice, you know, it's better to be kind. But when you're nice, it means that you're quiet and that you're not speaking what's true out there. You're not admitting that you're depressed or sad or, God forbid, angry. You know, when a woman shows her anger, someone says, you're angry. And they go, oh, no, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not angry. What I say now is, I'm angry. I'm angry about this. Yes, I am. Thank you for noticing. I want to be with my emotion because that is truth and love. And so that depressive complex that you speak of and that Carl Jung speaks of, it's so critical for us to be able to come into that dark space and to experience that exile from that, again, that external pressure to be fake, to ignore and separate from what's true and what's whole. You've probably heard of something called, I call it toxic positivity, but it's just this positivity thing that's going on right now. People are just saying, you know, be positive, and it ends up being a spiritual bypass in a way. It's saying, you know, just always, you know, say the positive affirmation. Even the book The Secret, when it came out, was really just about affirming what you want. That Maserati, it kind of even became, unfortunately, very surfacey. But there's this concept of just toxic positivity, just the positive mental state, positive psychology, where you are not to tune in to your deeper states, that you are exiling your soul. And that soul, that need, that creativity, the soul is where passion is and creativity, and actually your own individual identity is there. And the heart I see as like the amplifier, you know, so you've got your stereo, right? Remember that then you have the amplifier, you know, it's like, and unfortunately, I find for men especially, that when a man is born and he's getting to the age beyond toddlerhood and he cries because his friend took his toy or something, or it's really sad he didn't get what he wanted for his birthday or whatever comes up, the message from society is, don't cry, stop that. Don't you cry, don't you let them see you cry. So what's happening is that whole connection to the throat chakra is severed. No crying. So that means no feeling. No feelings can come through. No feeling means the soul is withering, and I want you to picture this, like a raisin in a cave behind a brick wall, and then in front of that is like another iron wall, and the keys at the bottom of the ocean with the Titanic. I mean, it can be so far away. And the devastation of human family right now. So many people just literally want to be connected to self. And so there are many therapists and interesting people that, you know, Jungians and things that through analysis help people come back into their depressive state in a safe way through dreams. Because dreams are, I had some weird ones last night, and I know it was probably because I was anticipating this wonderful deep conversation, and I had some that are just that, they're like poetry. They are a soul merge. So coming into that wholeness, coming into your creativity, into your feelings, for sure I can tell you as a recruiter, as somebody that holds space for people to open up to their dreams in their life, you will open up attraction at a whole new level if you are connected to your soul, your heart, your voice, your third eye, you know, inspiration, the greater energy system around us. Yeah, I'm all in for the depressive state when I need it.
And you are speaking our language here on the Dare to Dream podcast, because Vinny, my co-host, he has a sticker on his computer that says frequent crier club.
Oh.
And he calls me, I call him, we have a good cry. And that wasn't always the case. It was once we started getting in touch with our soul. And you said a couple things that brought up points I wanted to mention. There's this quote by Thomas More, and he says, "For the soul, depression is an initiation and a rite of passage." Mm-hmm. And I just learned about what you were mentioning, where there are some highly trained therapists who part of the therapy is nudging people back or toward the depression, because in that there's a purpose. So Jung talked about how depression is teleological. which means in the depression, there's a certain goal or a purpose that is served by that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try and bypass it, you're going to miss the goal or the purpose. You're going to miss a lesson. And that's very different than how other people look at depression, where it's more ideological cause and effect. Like, this bad thing happened
Mm-hmm.
to you, now you're depressed. Jung was saying, no, like, this could be your psyche saying, we need to bring you back internal, drop you into the darkness, take you to rock bottom so you can learn a lesson.
Yeah.
And this podcast, which I'm going to link in the show notes because it's so fantastic, talks about, especially with young men,
Mm-hmm.
you need that depressive state to move from the infantile ego to bring forth the masculine potential. And that used to be handled by rites of passage.
Yes.
And the elders would come together and take you away at 12, 13, 14, whatever, how old you were. And you'd go through this ritual, this challenge that would break down your ego and turn you into a man. And now this podcast was talking about, because that doesn't exist, so many young men are becoming depressed because your body knows, the psyche knows, nature knows that you need some sort of event to shift from boyhood to manhood. And if the civilization you're in isn't going to provide it, your psyche will.
Oh, yeah.
It'll take you there.
Oh, yeah. You know the book Iron John by Robert Bly?
No.
Okay. Next on your list. Oh, my gracious. There are very few fairy tales where there's a man or a boy who's the primary protagonist. You know, they're mostly Cinderella and Snow White, you know, kind of like that. But Iron John is a very powerful fairy tale about the rite of initiation from boyhood to manhood. And it's the idea that men need to claim their wild manhoodness. They need to know who their own wild man inside. And that it's confusing. It's confusing. You know, is that acceptable? And, you know, what does it mean and what is it like and how does it fit in today's world? So Robert Bly's book on Iron John is he takes you through the fairy tale, and then after kind of significant portions, he reflects on that beautifully and kind of brings it around to modern time. But one part I want to share right now in the podcast that was really, really significant for me as a mother. I have one child. He's a boy. He's 22 now. And I took him through Waldorf education because I wanted him to have access to nature, his own feelings, to just growing his body before he got too much into a cerebral, you know, kind of place. And that book was recommended. And at the beginning of the story, how the fairy tale actually goes is that there is a kingdom. Always right. So there's a kingdom, and there's a king, and there's a prince, and there's a queen, and there's all the subjects. There is a wild man who looks like Bigfoot, hairy, you know, head to toe, huge, tall, lumbering thing, running around, eating cows, you know, and just destroying things and just kind of crazy all over the place. And everybody's terrified of him, and so is the king. So he locks the kingdom, he locks the gates, and he refuses to allow anybody to leave in trying to protect all of his people. So now everybody's locked in. They're no longer free, and they're afraid of something wild out there. One day, a young man who's just kind of coming down, he's got his handkerchief on, he's got, you know, his sort of like his pack, he's got his dog, and he's just loving life, and he's just coming on down the road. And he's like, where is everybody? And they're like, come in through the gates. You're going to be killed by the wild man. And he's like, what? What do you mean? I'm not afraid of any wild man. What are you saying? They said, he'll eat you. He'll kill you. He says, I will find this wild thing and I will take care of it so you guys can come back out, you know? So he starts looking, he's going into the forest, and then he sees the wild man, and he turns towards him, and the wild man rushes him and eats his dog in one bite. So now he's mad. So he's like, okay, I'm taking you down. We're going to have this out, you know? So he chases the wild man to where the wild man lives, which is at the bottom of the lake. And he says, now I know where you are. So it's like the depths of psyche, you know, so we start to get into these symbols. So he goes back to the kingdom, and he brings out a group of men with buckets, and they start to now just pull the water out of the lake until the wild man is at the bottom of the lake, and they capture him and they put him in a cage in the middle of the kingdom for all to see. Everybody's afraid of him, right? And they're walking around, they're not getting too close. But the prince is curious. So the prince gets closer to the cage and looks at him and is curious, and the wild man says, let me out. And the prince runs away. Next day comes back again, let me out. The prince says, I can't let you out. I don't have the key. And he said, oh, yes, you do. Now, this is the really fascinating part that hit me as a mom. He said, you have the golden key. Actually, your mother has it underneath her pillow. That's where it is. And what Robert Bly explained in his notes is that every mother does have the golden key to give her son for when the time is right, as he comes of age, 13, 14, that he can open up his own wildness and he can explore who he is. But like many women, mothers, don't know they have the key. So they don't work towards that separation from the mom, the bosom in a way, out to the wild world. So they just don't know. Or B, they know they have it, but they're going to sort of blackmail. Don't you ever leave me. You know, I've got this key and I can give it to you or I can pull it back. I can give it to you. So there's blackmail. Third kind of C is they know they have it under the pillow, but they're just too afraid or too, unaware and don't know really what to do with it. And then there's really like the last mother that says, I've got this. I'm going to give it to you when the time is right. We're going to have a rite of initiation, and I'm going to snip that last sort of spiritual umbilical cord, and off you go. I knew I had to do it. I put together a party for my son at the age of 14, and I asked all of his relatives and close cousins and everyone, well, they were too young, but aunties and uncles, and I asked them each to write for William in their best calligraphy or whatever, and to kind of paste little bits of nature on there, like little leaves and things, and say what they saw in him. What wildness, what greatness, what potential did they see in my son? They all wrote it down, and then I drew a picture. I painted a tree with all of these symbols for William, and then he and I read The Alchemy together.
Great book.
Great book for this moment. And we had a party, and William's like, thanks, Mom. That's great. He didn't really know. I cried for a week. I knew I was letting him go because I didn't want him to be stuck as a mama's boy, or he didn't have access to his own wild self, that he wouldn't go forward or be able to tune into his own depression or his own joy or his own failures, his own successes, that he couldn't just live the life in his most authentic, brilliant way. This book I recommend to every mother, and I recommend it to every man to read. You'll see as the story goes on from here, when the boy steals the key, that's what he had to do, and he unlocks the cage. The wild man comes out, and he and the prince, they move on to the rite of initiation. And you'll see all of the classic from the hero's tale of the slash on the thigh, the falling in love and out of love, the big love relationship, the rejection of love, the dark woods, the fighting of the dragon. Essential to come into your whole self and live that way. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Life is poetry.
Life is poetry. And I know you're going to read some in a little bit,
Yeah.
but I want to speak to this on a personal level, and then also talking about someone else I admire for his thinking. Jordan Peterson talks about, he obviously relates most things to the Bible these days, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but he talks about the exact same thing from the lens of Mother Mary and letting Jesus go forth, and this decision that moms have to make between, you can hold on and keep your son with you, because if you let them go out, their body might die. They might be taken, they might be killed. But if you keep them there, their soul will die.
Yeah.
And he talks about the tension and the push and pull between that.
He's an interesting man because I know he is really struggling for the truth and the understanding of why we're all so oppressed and unhappy and struggling. And I see Jordan Peterson with an inner kind of battle and himself, because he's part of the manhood that has held on to a state of predation, in a way of like, hey, I'm at the top of the pecking order, And there's a beautiful book by Barbara Erickman, I think it is, or Ehrlichman, and it's called Blood Rights. And she's talking about how at the beginning of time, when humans moved from like gathering and finding all their berries or whatever, and they started to eat animals and things, women with the suckling baby, they go, ah, and they'd scare away prey. So men became the stealth hunters. And through society, through all this time, it's put a lot of pressure on men to have that sole role as the hunter, because that predation then assuages fear of dying. It is, hey, if I can be the apex predator, if I can be hyper control of myself and everyone else, and if I can have power and money and success and, all the women I want and this and that, then I won't die. And I see Jordan Peterson struggling with that and helping young men struggle with that. And what I hope for Jordan Peterson is that he brings in a woman to help him find his own feminine, to understand that this is the time where we get to go from humans, from predator to stewards. In order for us to make that evolutionary step, men and women have to integrate together in all their beauty and move out of a caste system and a hierarchy. So it's interesting that you brought him up, because I hear him sometimes say something like that, so beautiful. And then I see him deny the fact that women in work, there is no equality. There's still very much that it's a man's world going on there. So it's, you and I have been talking before a little bit about, like, you know, you can have, well, there's the yin yang, everything is not going to be so pure. Where can you garner your wisdom and watch somebody else's very public share and struggle? He's very public about his life. He almost died in Russia, you know, and his daughter's very concerned about him. There's a lot to kind of watch and see and learn from him that may be similar in some ways to even some of the other greats, you know, what they were struggling with as they were just trying to understand the human psyche, especially the masculine boxed psyche. You know, a man wants to cry when a man wants to cry. Let's go for it. You know, I raised my son that way. You can feel.
I love that so much. You are totally right. I don't think Jordan Peterson has ever been in touch with his feminine side, but he does have so many good sayings. One of the ones I also love by him is, you accrue incremental wisdom as you implement a flawed plan. That has been a life philosophy for me with this podcast, with my coaching business, with the nonprofit I started, all these things. But there was a piece that I wanted to speak to. Oh, it was that combination or the synergy between the masculine and the feminine. Mm-hmm. I have been told, not as a compliment in the past, that I'm very in touch with my feminine. And when I first heard that, I was like, what do you mean? No, I'm not.
Right.
I'm a man. I'm a manly man. And as I've matured, I've been able to realize that, yes, that is true. And there's so much power. I think that the feminine is really the superpower. The masculine is the blunt hammer, the object. You can go smash things. But the feminine is making sure you're heading in the right direction and you're tapped in to your inner guidance and the wisdom. Yeah. And I think the combination of those two is so powerful. And that to me is healthy masculinity. And that's part of my mission, is to illustrate healthy masculinity, which is, yes, you have the masculine and you can cut down a tree with your bare hands, but you have the feminine and you value that yin energy.
Yeah. Oh my gracious, it is such a compliment, and I completely understand how you would feel that way, because again, society is shaping and saying all sorts of horrible things to boys and keeping them from their feelings. But, you know, Heart Math Institute decided to come forward in Northern California to prove through science that the heart truly is the seat of your intelligence, that the heart radiates about, if I get this right, but something like 5,000-6,000 times greater than the mind when you first meet another being. So you are first connecting energetically through your heart, and that the heart is even predictive. It's even kind of like string theory and other things, like it is moving through that space and time. And if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, remember the Dr. Brand moment where she says, we got to go to this planet over here. You know, Matthew McConaughey's like, you only want to go there because you're in love with Mike or whatever that astronaut's name is, or cosmonaut. And she said, well, it's true. I'm in love with him. And he said, well, you can't make a decision on love, okay? And she said, well, you know, love's not just a utility. We love people who are dead. Okay, so I'm going to start there. And then she says, I believe that love is our sixth sense. I believe that that's why we survive and thrive as humans. I believe that to be true myself also. 100%. If we can help humanity come back to their hearts, especially men and women, so they don't feel shamed. You know, as a recruiter, it was only about 4 years ago that I advised women that were going through a hiring process and they were doing the psychological sort of test or temperament survey, that they should answer it as their whole self, their masculine, feminine, mothering, whatever self. Prior to that, I said, answer it as your work self, AKA masculine self. But the world is calling in the whole. And I think that's why right now it's so turgid, it's so chaotic, because we're repatterning. And all of us that are alive right now are having to keep our head above water. But we continue to choose love. Love is that through line, again, to the sea of love, from the melting, the top, you know, of mountains, and all of that ice is melting, coming down that raging river. And we're all in the class 5. That's what it is right now, you know. We're going to make it there. But that heart resilience, it's going to change humanity. I'm all in.
So how do people live more from the heart and less from the head? Because that's something that I think about a lot, and I would love to get your perspective on it.
Good question. Michael Meade, once again, taught us about antagonistic mentoring. The number one way that you can start to live more from your heart is starting to recognize that chaos or crisis in your life, whether it be illness, a lost job, lost relationship, that actually is the opening to your intuition. So most of the time we get highly defensive, we reject, we'll cut somebody out of our life, we'll go running, maybe we'll make it worse, we might spread rumors, we'll do a whole bunch of things. And what Michael Meade taught me once when I was at one of his live events was the importance of understanding that it is through sometimes the really big crisis that we get stopped in our tracks enough that if we can remember then to feel the feels and then get still, the guidance will come up. So here's an example of that. When Michael Meade was when I saw him live, he was talking about the real importance right now of mentors. So those that are maybe in our post 50, those that have lived, quite a bit before and after social media, phones and things, that we are being called to be mentors of the youth that are coming in, Gen Z, that are really here, the first natives with technology and the way it is, and that the two together, we can really support the dream of their world, but we can make sure that they also understand how the world is made up and they can find their way. And so as he finished his conversation, a young woman, probably a Gen Zer in the back, raised her hand and she pushed back on that. And she said, Michael, thank you, but I'd have to disagree. And he said, oh, really? Okay, tell me more about that. And she said, well, I graduated college with a degree in writing. I was very excited to become a writer. I asked my favorite professor if he would take me in for office hours and if he would guide me through the process. He said yes. I was thrilled. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world and that I had something to bring. So we started our process and I was meeting with him weekly. Soon, within just one or two meetings, he started to be hypercritical and shaming in a way that felt almost competitive. He didn't like that I was taking chances with a particular type of storyline. And I became so discouraged and shamed that I left my time with him, that mentorship, and I've stopped writing. And all the faces looked from her back to Michael for his answer, right? And he said, okay, I hear you. He says, let me ask you a question. She goes, sure. What are you doing now? She said, well, I work at a local theater, and my job is to help the writers with their stories and to craft it for the stage. And he said, do you like what you're doing? She said, oh, I love it. It's just so fun. And with the writers now, and it's like on stage, and it's live, and it's creating a new story. She just went off, right? And he said, should we write a thank you note to your mentor? She went, oh my gosh. And I realized from that day forward that when these things happen and we feel the feels and we have to go in a different direction, and it can even be a friend who's betrayed us, we can feel the feels and we might shake and we might sweat and we might feel shame and fear and overwhelm. Allow the feelings to well up because they are messengers. And then once you start to cycle back around with those feelings again, then it's time to take the deep breath in and out. And you're flipping now from the ego that's kind of like bearing the feelings, or like you're letting out. The whole mind and heart is just out, right? Then you take the breath and you drop into your heart and you say, I'm open to the guidance. Sometimes you will hear immediately in your own voice in your head, or you will just hear, you'll get like a visual. Other times it could take a week or it can take a month. You will know what to do, and it will become apparent because your heart knows. It will channel in consideration with, everything externally that's going on, but that intuitive voice now will be able to respond to the feelings. It will have taken the juice from that. It will have set in an internal kind of process. No part of you now is being denied or exiled. It has all had its moment. So you had your temper tantrum in a way, and then you've received it for what guidance it brings, and then you've held space for that. And, I've had it where I've had an answer immediately from a client who was scaring me, and I thought he was going to take my business down. And when I went through my emotion or my feelings with him, the message instantly was, you need to be more in your masculine, Lori. You're working with a CEO level candidate right now. Grow up. And I was like, well, thank you, Rick. And then that was the last day he called and threatened me because I got the lesson. Another time a friend betrayed me. It took me 4 months because the lesson that she gave me was well, she's no longer my friend group because she's going through some things and it's not healthy, but that's okay. But the lesson, I mean, it's just part of life, you know. But the lesson that I got from her was that even if you're bringing love to another person, you need to ask permission. She had asked me for help. I gave it to her, and then I made another offer without checking in if she wanted more help. And that released a monster response. It was crazy in my mind, but it was really honest. And what she showed me is that love given to another can trigger for them an experience or a memory when it was dangled out there as some sort of something to draw you in so that somebody could then attack you. She's one of my greatest teachers. So that's how I find that we awaken that heart, is that through the crisis, through the hardship, through that person that's hurt us or that situation, the heart is right there. It's going to take that experience and grow in its wisdom and intuition. So it's the antagonistic mentor process. And I teach it through this little book online called Way of the Monarch. So you can jump into that anytime.
It's a beautiful idea that even if the mentor is showing up in a seemingly bad way, that they have something to teach you and that there's treasure within every experience and that you can take a lesson from nearly everything.
And usually you're going to grow faster from the hardship, right? It's not going to be when everything is just vanilla and lemonade. You know, it's just going to be, it's that Christ that stops you in your tracks, that moves you forward. So your soul is going, yay, we're about to have growth and change. Your ego's going, this is the worst. So allow the ego to have this experience and understand that there's a lot going on with those emotions. Don't block it. Don't resist. Don't spiritual bypass. Don't be just only positive. Go into that depressive place. Feel those feels. Be fully human. And then give that sovereignty back to the heart as soon as you've gone through and say, I'm open to the guidance. It will come.
The willingness to step into the darkness, into the dark woods, to face whatever it is that we're most afraid of. Again, it makes me think of Joseph Campbell with, the cave you fear to enter most holds the treasure you seek.
Yes.
And having to go in for that. I want to transition to the poetry piece. And I want to wrap this up in a way that people get to learn more about you and what you're offering to the world, because I think that's why we bond so much. I mean, it's definitely the love of all the same topics, but the fact that you are doing what I do in helping people figure out what they want to do with their life through, from my eyes, a more structured lens. Like, I love that you have you can get this job over here you have bills to pay, you need to meet a certain level of income. That's great. We'll focus on that. But then what's that dream job over here and that out of the box job? And I think your background as an executive recruiter just lends credibility and experience to it. So take us away into the last chapter of this podcast.
Yes. Oh, thank you. First of all, we do majorly bond in all of these areas. You and I are doing the same thing through just different entry points. You know, I find that the greatest healing can come through transition. And whether it be a job, in my case, I'm helping people in that transition point. It can be also being a mother for the first time. It can be going through menopause for a woman, let's say. It can be the buying of a home, the loss of a home. It can be a flood, it can be COVID. It's just whatever these transitions, but really kind of even the standard transitions are really good places. Marriage is a good one, divorce, because we can find ourselves very vulnerable and literally cracked open. And so I came into recruiting in 2001 on the heels of September 11th. And I was 8 months pregnant, about 8 months pregnant when the Twin Towers fell. And I went into labor, and my husband had to bring me into the hospital, and there were tons of women in labor. We were all possums. We were like pushing out the babies. In this case, not playing dead, but trying to push out the baby and run for safety. That moment of experiencing 9/11 and then birthing a child, being laid off because I was in financial services, and so there was a huge financial recession kind of thing going on. And then I had an autoimmune complete collapse, and I was dying. I just had a absolute burn up ashes moment, and I had to sell our home again in a month. Several times I have hit the line where I cannot afford my house. So I keep hitting that one of like, I'll be fine now, but it took me a couple times to really feel okay with that. So it happened here again. And I had to move in with my parents at the age of 36 with my husband and my child and enter into acupuncture 4 days a week. And that was the moment I cracked from being a compliant woman into one who was awakening and understanding. I had to have my own experience and tune into my own life and intuition. And that's when I knew I needed to change my career path from just doing fun work and being great at it and being professional. And, I was still having fun. It was, I was working with people I really liked and I saw meaning in the work, but I wanted to practice radical kindness in the world. Certainly September 11th and the despair that we saw internationally drew me to that. So I became a recruiter when I was recruited by my recruiter. And I found that recruiters were really treating people like things, that they were just something to be sold. Because that's, you make a match and you make quite a bit of money off of that. And so I quit. I literally went up to my boss. I said, there's not enough love here. I'm going to move back to California. I'm going to start my own agency. And I did. I had to wait a year because I had a non-compete. I started the agency to transform headhunting into human connection. And I started to flood it with feminine values. And that was the beginning of holding space. People would come onto the line and they'd say, Lori, I'm looking for a new job. And I'd hear a tremor. And I'd say, okay, Jenny, I'm so glad that we're going to have this time together. I want you to know I hold this neutral space for dreaming. And I just want to ask, are you okay? And do you need to cry with me first? And they would burst into tears. Often they would tell me that they were dealing with significant health issues, because if you don't go to that depressive state, if you don't allow that to work its way through you and you just bottle up, whatever you're feeling, it can turn into disease. And we know about, just the spiritual anatomy of blocked emotion, cancer and many things too they land wherever your weakness is. You can get arthritis in that place where you had that injury when you were 10. It's just like that energy that doesn't move. So I found that the channel of work and change through work was a highly traumatizing space where people were told a false story that you're just supposed to get a job and everybody does, and you just do your resume and push on through it. I held the space for the deep despair and fear and also hope. And finally, Career Ecology came out because through the years, I recognized that people were interviewing in a place of split identity. They were interviewing from a place of performance. Even when a coach would say, well, here's what you do to win, and here's how you have to anticipate what they want. Everything was about splitting from self and being of service in the moment. And I recognized that that was re-traumatizing people again and again. So I teach this mindful interviewing, which is all about interviewing is not a performance, it's a service. How can I help you know me? That moves it from the ego place of I better perform and win or I'm dead or not loved into the place of I trust our connection. I want to respond to you and I want to help you know me because you're trying to make a decision for your business, and that helps me make a decision for myself. So that's made all the difference. And then I recognized resumes are artifacts of the industrial age. My day, they were on paper. I remember the vellum. I remember picking it after college. But now online and the massive amount of resumes being passed, people are overwhelmed and lost, completely lost now. And there's a sense really of almost like you're in outer space and you're an astronaut and it's been snipped, like your connection to the spaceship, and you are drifting. Will anybody see me? There's 500 applicants. So through the resume, I call it almost like resume therapy. And I take people back into their story and we reclaim story. And so they write their own resume according to a process that I made, knowing what others, in terms of like, a recruiter like myself or a hiring manager, what they need, because I want to make it easier for everyone to know each other. So they do their own resume with my guidance and they resist, let me tell you. But by the end, they're usually with exclamations of F words and happy things. They're just saying, thank you so much. Now I know myself. And it completely shifts their whole connection with the world. We do also the threefold path for search. So we open up the bold choices. Really, it turns out that work is the modern day hero's journey. We are constantly, perpetually thrust out into the dark woods, unaware. Do I have a compass? Do I know the map? What's my navigation? Do I have enough food? Will I see another human soul here? Will I die here? That is literally what people feel. And I show up as the Sherpa, and I want to appropriate that word, but it really is perfect. I show up and I say, I know you want to climb this mountain. I know it feels dangerous. And it kind of is in some ways. So I'm going to join you. And I do have a compass. I've been up this mountain many times. And I also have a chocolate bar and a water bottle. And I'm going to help you learn to navigate by the stars. And I say, I want you to look up. Most people, you know what they're doing? They're looking back. They're looking for the path back to the parking lot. Maybe I just get my old job. Maybe I could just reproduce what felt safe. But the thing is, they're already in exile. The old job, it was layoff, it's gone. But they're still walking backwards. And I stop them, I say, let's look up. Let's open up that navigation system. And it turns out, through finding a new job, people move forward and their entire sense of self, they evolve to a higher level of consciousness and joy and connectivity in the world, all through the portal of finding a job. Who knew? It's pretty big.
That sounds like the absolute most magical process. How can people who are listening to this, who either are in transition already or having that quiver, that moment where they realize, oh, I really don't want to be here anymore, how can people find you, find Career Ecology, and go on that beautiful journey with you?
I love the word quiver. That just made me quiver. I loved it. I want to make this easy. So every Tuesday at 3:30 PST, I have Career Ecology 101, and I always post it on LinkedIn every Tuesday morning. And I say, come in and, come on in, have a conversation. There are people in Career Ecology that are there talking about their threefold path. And I just invite people in to imagine a different way. Then they also could come on into the whole experience if they just want to begin. And interestingly, this is extremely affordable. And I do that because I wanted, Michael Meade said in that day when I was with him in Santa Monica, he said, all of us that are supporting others on their path of life, your number one responsibility is to help empower them into their own genius. You're doing that. I'm doing that. I want to empower people out of the box into their own genius. So Career Ecology has been built in a way to make sure that they hold on to their own sovereignty and responsibility. I say to them, this is your mountain to climb. I will be there, but I'm not pulling you. It's your own mountain. So Career Ecology is actually something that is very accessible too. So they can come onto the website, which is Career Ecology. And the reason why it's called that, because the idea of ecology is the relationship of a biological being with its environment. And then I add it to the internal environment of the being as well. So careerecology.com. And they can come in and talk to me, and they can come into the process. And I would be so honored to be the wind in their wings, and help them along. Yeah.
Fantastic. Is it time for poetry?
It is. Thank you for, I brought in my book. There we go. So we'll put it in the notes. But it's Mary Oliver's book called Devotions. And Mary Oliver is one of the most prolific poets, nature poets in the world. And I bought her book, and I bought this used off of Amazon. You can do that for like $2 or something. And the book arrived, and the person who sent it to me left the feather inside. This is my bookmark, came with the book. So I chose this poem, which is one of her most iconic poems. And this is a good poem that sort of deals with a feeling of exile, self-loathing, lostness, kind of some of the concepts we've been dealing with. And it's her way of addressing that in such a beautiful way, and brings us back to the big human family. So I'm going to put on my post-50 reading glasses. Ooh, there we go. Okay. Through my little... Okay. Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting. Over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. Yeah, that says it all.
I felt something while you were reading that. And at first I thought it was me being sassy and making a joke and saying, if career ecology doesn't work out, you can just read poetry for a living. And then I realized it was me envisioning you reading your poetry book and how powerful and impactful that's going to be. And I can't wait for that moment.
Oh my God, you just made me cry. Is that next? Is that my next bold action?
I think so.
All right, well, we'll have another podcast when that happens. You made me cry. Thank you. Okay, I accept it. I accept the challenge.
Challenge accepted. Lori, thank you so much for coming on today. Literally since the first time I met you at the group in San Diego, within 3 minutes, I feel like I was like, she's coming on the podcast. And ever since then, I mean, we've had so many conversations around so many different things, and there's this resonance. And I love that you seem to have read every single book ever and can bring in pieces from all of that, and that you are deeply in touch with your feminine and that superpower that comes from that.
Thank you so much. I felt it too. You are so gifted at such a young age. I am decades older than you, and it took me a long time to get to this place of kind of integration of a lot of these different thoughts and bringing back in, you know, the exile and the darkness and things. It's a real gift to the world to have somebody who's in that newer, younger generation, and that's a man, and that has that full, beautiful, wild aspect of his creative self and his intuitive self here. I know it's going to be a long friendship for us. We are going to hold our own. I always say, you know, choose the bold. There's so many different titles for what you do, but live a story worth telling.
Yes.
We are going to have our own workshop in December, and we're bringing in all my career ecology people. And I know there'll be many more things next year as well. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in with us today. As always, we love you guys, and we will see you next time. If you liked this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the Dare to Dream podcast on YouTube. You want to make sure you don't miss out on any of the amazing episodes we're going to be coming out with in the future. And if you liked this video specifically, please give it a like, leave a comment, let us know what you loved. Thank you so much for being here. We love you guys.